All right. We are live once again. Thank you very much for joining us today. And for folks that are watching this on demand, my name is Eric Wright. I'm going to be your host for Turbonomic Labs Live. If you do want to interact, please do make sure you feel free to do so. You can find me. There we go. You can hit that little thing there. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Disco Posse. Also, feel free to connect on LinkedIn. If you're watching us on LinkedIn Live, that is always appreciated. We found this is one of our more popular platforms. It seems that LinkedIn Live is really becoming a great spot for a lot of folks to broadcast, and we find that's really good. Of course, we're also live on Periscope and we're live on YouTube, so we're going out to all the streams. The goal of Turbonomic Labs is to make sure that we can share some of the emerging work that we're doing and sometimes even go over just sort of the core fundamentals. So every Tuesday, we have what we call Turbo Tuesdays. Turbo Tuesdays are geared towards folks that are using Turbonomic or looking to use Turbonomic, and they want to unlock some of the capabilities, get more familiar with it, dive into some of the really nifty use cases that we can unlock and help them with. So we're going to talk about a specific thing today. And then, of course, you can join us every Thursday. And Thursdays are actually going to be our Open Tech Thursdays. And this could be basically anything that's purely for the purposes of exploring new technologies and new things in architecture patterns. And we're actually going to be doing more stuff where we bring in a few different speakers. We're going to do some panels and such. We want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your whole IT environment and your career. What I've got is this is coming Thursday. We've got some neat stuff that's coming up. You can always go, of course, to YouTube, and you'll be able to get all of the stuff on demand. So if you will go to youtube.com/Turbonomic, that will make sure that you can catch all of these. You can even watch them at a more rapid pace, just in case you wanted to see them in a little less time. So this Thursday, if you're watching us live, you can check out is building TLS-enabled Jekyll pages using AWS Amplify. This is something I started to do recently. I've been a long-time user of kind of the single-page app approach. So you don't need to do much other than to build something with what we call Jekyll, which is a great Ruby-based platform for doing very simple static pages. However, they're not simple in their capabilities. You can do some really neat stuff. It allows you to use Markdown. And we're going to explore how to use AWS Amplify to first stand up your page, run an update, set up TLS so you can actually have a fully secured web app, all using literally a few clicks. However, there's some tricks along the way, so you're going to see how to do it. The beauty of AWS Amplify is you can do it very low cost. And some people will say, hey, I could do it with GitHub Pages. We'll explore that and show the differences and why I use it and why I've got a lot of other folks already converted. So I wrote a blog about it recently, so I'll share that. So join us Thursday. TLS-enabled Jekyll pages using AWS Amplify, because it's also the start of some other neat AWS Amplify stuff we're going to do. But for today, we're going to get to the good stuff. We're going to talk over about what we want to do. And this one is something neat. So I'm going to jump over, and you can see I've got a wee presentation to share to get us started. So, of course, the Turbonomic Labs, I'm proud because we've been able to explore some of the emerging technologies that are inside the Turbo platform. And this is one of the coolest new features, because we wanted to help introduce a lot of people when they deploy Turbo. They're looking at how do they make sure, number one, they're getting, that it's doing what they expect to do, and they're getting the most out of it as far as performance. And on top of that, we get a lot of people say, hey, I'd love to see how things look in my environment if I were to be in maybe a next generation architecture. So we've actually solved both those problems for you. What we're doing is we're going to talk about Turbo on Turbo. And this is kind of a funky design in that we are deploying Turbonomic, and then we are pointing it at all of its own internal services on our next generation architecture, so that you can literally see the entire architecture of your Turbonomic platform. Not only can you see it, but we can actually optimize, which is really cool. So I kind of treat this like Inception. you're going to take a look where you literally deploy your own turbo. It points back onto itself, understands how to actually, instrument, see the performance requirements, and in fact can even look at how to adjust as you continue to scale. We've got some incredible new stuff that's coming down the pipeline as far as new features and new capabilities. And by using this technique, what you can really do is literally create where Turbo completely manages itself so that it knows when it needs more resources because of the ability for now to be a completely horizontally scalable platform, so that you're no longer needing to think about scaling up your installation. But because we're running an entirely container-based infrastructure with an internal Kubernetes environment, that you can actually deploy Turbo on Kubernetes as the underlay. So you don't even need to be running vCenter or Hyper-V or anything. You could run from the marketplace or SaaS, or there's lots of different deployment techniques. But you can literally, all you run is Kubernetes, and you simply deploy Turbo on Kubernetes as a Kubernetes-enabled app, and then it will actually show up. And out of the box, in the latest editions of Turbonomic, you will be able to see, and it automatically targets itself. And this is what you're going to see. And actually, when in doubt, let's just get out of the presentation because we want to actually see the stuff live. That's why we do Turbo live. So let's take a look and see what it looks like in real time. Okay, here we go. All right, now what you're seeing here is this is a Turbonomic installation. We've got a variety of different targets that are already configured. Of course, if you're brand new, you'll some of the stuff will be fresh. Even if you're an existing platform user, there's some really neat stuff that you're going to get excited about. We'll go much more deeply into it in coming episodes because all this goodness you see on the right, we've talked about it on our customer webinars, and there's going to be some more news about what's actually powering these new views. But we're going to jump right into what we're talking about today, which is Turbo on Turbo. So Turbo on Turbo means that I can actually go in and, I'm seeing my business apps, I'm seeing all the different services from the applications all the way literally down to the metal, out to the cloud. So that's great, right? I've got the entire environment instrumented, continuously getting that instrumentation and analytics in real time. We can look at the different views. But what's really cool is if I just click on search, and inside search, and I'm going to head over and I'm going to go to namespaces. And that's what I showed you in the slide there. So you're seeing under namespaces, you see a namespace called Turbonomic. So this is a Kubernetes namespace. And one of the neat things we're doing with managing Kubernetes and optimizing cloud native on Kubernetes, any upstream Kubernetes implementation we can actually plug into. And what we've done is, because we can do that, you deploy something like Kube Turbo or QB Turbo, depending on how you pronounce it. Kube Turbo or QB Turbo is the new kubectl or kubectl. But Kube Turbo, what it will do is it allows you to pull back instrumentation from the management API and feed it into Turbo. And then we can now bidirectionally feed back anything we need to do via that API. So we can do really slick things around understanding when to scale up containers, when to scale out pods, and actually when to scale out the underlying infrastructure. So what we see, let's just click on here. You're going to see a variety of different, very Kubernetes-centric things in the user interface. And this is what's really cool. The UI is now got a lot of new features. So we're going to see a namespace. We see the workload controllers. We actually see what we call a container spec. So this is the definition of the container. This is important because when we define a container and we want to size up or size down a container, remember, containers are ephemeral. They are supposed to kind of go away and be replaced or redeployed, respawned, whatever you want to choose as your nomenclature. But ultimately, when you redeploy a pod, you're blowing it away and restarting it. So the challenge that any platforms have had out there is that they don't maintain an understanding of historical usage because the container goes away. However, the application requirements are key. So even though you have ephemeral containers, you shouldn't have an ephemeral understanding of how they've performed. And this is the where we're really doing amazing things, because now we're going to maintain an understanding of the container spec. We see the pods, we see containers, we see the actual components, service layers, the transactions that are occurring, and ultimately that top layer business application, which in this case, it's us. It's literally turbo on turbo. So what I'm actually instrumenting right now is my own machine pointing right at itself. So it's just like BMO and that little cartoon thing, feeding himself its own batteries. So if I look at the business application, the top layer, and you can see what we've got is the different health indicators that are happening inside the, we call them the donuts. So if you look at the donuts, some of them have yellow, some of them have a yellow and red, some of them are all green. So what we're seeing now at the business layer, number one, you click on details and you're going to be able to see different data that's going to be about the application tier. If that's, where we, and then if you've got other apps that are instrumented, you're going to see quality of service metrics like transaction flow and response time. We're able to see at the top layer now all of the different applications that are connected to it. In this case, because we're targeting already, our context and our scope is one app, so you're only seeing one in the list. But you see all of the different actions which are rolling up into that business application. And the reason why that's really cool is because you now have kind of one place to go and you're seeing everything that could affect it. And that's why we have like all those arrows in the UI, is understanding the relationships and the dependencies. We've discovered this automatically. So we're actually, this is completely dynamic. And if I go down, let's go to the transaction layer. So inside my business app, what I've actually got is different transactions that are occurring. And this is being automatically discovered because we've created what we call, we're calling it right now the DIF, or the data ingestion framework, where we can actually see and apply an understanding of service layers inside the application tier, so that we can see that, because quite often, a lot of organizations we talk to, they don't think in the context of servers anymore. They want to pool together a group of, whether it's containers, pods, VMs, and name them, tag them accordingly as a service tier, because then that service may actually, let's say I've got, shared SQL. Well, I have 48 applications that share that SQL environment. So if I look at that service, I should see all of the dependencies that it relates to. And now I can actually do that and in one place. So this is really, really slick. Again, we're going to explore the data ingestion framework and the really cool way you can actually connect all these dots with a very simple JSON template. So I look over here and I see top business transactions. So this is going to sort them automatically by risk, the same way that we do in a regular implementation. So what I'm seeing is the different, so these are actually the services inside Turbo. You're literally getting to see like an X-ray inside the core platform itself. We're actually gathering response time and transaction flow inside Turbo. Now, this is a small demo environment, so it's not getting a significant amount of load on it, which is why you're only seeing little bits of deviations. But even in my small lab environment, there's the potential that what I've got is I'm going to be able to see where there's difficulty, and then ultimately not just be able to see what the difficulty is, but how do you actually do something about it? So over here, same thing at the service layer. Now I can see the different actions that are related to each service. So if I were to go through and pick a service, then I'm going to drill in. And now this is the cool thing. Again, remember the context will always adjust dynamically on your left-hand side. We call it our supply chain. So on the supply chain here, what you're seeing is that now that I've drilled into the transaction, I see the service, I see all the components, the containers, and I see everywhere it lives, down to the metal. So I'm able to see down to the metal, out to the cloud, on the containers, the whole full stack, and then understand the relationship of how it goes. And if there were other services or other applications that depended on it, then we would be able to see those. So again, just you can click through. It's completely dynamic. In this case, I grab a namespace. Let's go back to the root here. So I'm just only focusing at namespace upwards. So my namespace now, remember I saw transactions. So there you go. So I can see the actions, get right to it, which is really cool. And you're seeing stuff like heap, database memory. You're going to see things around scaling the pod, increasing container size. And because we can see those actions, this now, even here, we're actually potentially oversized. And because we're understanding the actual application requirements, when we say to scale down, we are only going to scale down within the capabilities of the container and the application itself. I'll never scale down a container below what the heap size is set to. And this is what's really important when we're doing things around scaling. So when BMO is putting his own batteries in his back, he has to make sure he's got the right batteries. Now we go down to the service tier, and we're going to see all the different service layers that are happening. So we've got the transactions. So this is the actual flow of transactions that are coming from the services. And if I look at, and this is the cool thing, these are all the different services that are happening inside your Turbonomic platform. Every single mediation. So mediation is where I'm actually controlling and interacting with a third party partner. So I've got stuff like HDS, I've got NetFlow, I've got Cloud Foundry, I've got VPlex, AIX, all these different things. So what you'll see is here, we've got an auth service. So our auth service is, we're seeing right now a slight increase in overall value relative to recent measurement and the observation period. So we're going to take a look. We're going to see where those anomalous things are happening for you. So you don't have to define normal. It's dynamic because it's based on actual response time, based on actual quality of service. We've got Horizon here. So this is a little bit busier because we've got some potential health issues. So again, I drill into the Horizon service. We'll go down that service rabbit hole. And then at the service layer, I see the component that's making it up. So I'm seeing there's a mediation component. I see the container it runs on. So what we're seeing right now is we have a need to increase container memory on that specific container. And remember that we're also going to do things like adjusting container specs. If you've got stuff like a CI/CD workflow, we can do some really cool stuff. We're potentially integrating where your workflows are so that the next time you spawn that container, we're actually tracking and maintaining the state that you need it to and defining that when the new container is launched. So there's a lot of interesting things in what we do there. So we can drill in service by service. Then again, literally from the app down to the metal, seeing exactly what goes on. See the what happens as if we take changes, all the detail around it. And when you actually look at the actions themselves, let's take a look at expand. So we can see, what is the before and after, what it's going to look like. Again, we're seeing the effect, in what it's consuming right now as far as virtual CPU, even where it's a nominal change in utilization and impact, that could have a huge downstream effect. A friend that I used to work with, he used to call it many littles making a much. That may be a French-Canadian thing, but I like to use it. So back to our namespace. So this, again, we've now seen business app. We see the transaction. We look at the service layer. So we can see not only all the services, but the ultimate impact. So that at the top here, we're seeing an impact at the application layer. It's not the core application may not be red. It may not be entirely at risk. However, there's portions at risk, which is why you're seeing yellow. Then we go further down, and that specific service may be at a higher risk. And what we can do is you can actually take some of these actions, and you're going to see where it actually restarts containers. The beauty part is that it's actually, because it's containerized, it will respawn and immediately rejoin and continue to operate as the application. You're going to see all the data as to why we need to do that. You're going to see the different components. Again, you can drill in. We can see all the different actions. So the context of every time we go through these different layers will change. And then we get down to the container layer itself. And like I said, we see all these different actions. And this is the fun part. When you're in a moderate or a small size data center, what we'll do is we've often seen that people will say they look to the left, and if you hover over, it actually shows you, if these were hosts, like say it was a 4-host cluster, you're going to see 4 bars. and you'll see a before and after. You'll see the different resources in each one. Well, this is literally just a turbo containerized installation. And you can see how many things you've got to understand. So when you look at this view, it may not necessarily look like a before and after that you can interpret. It's really more there if you needed to zoom in and see more information and get more granular. But ultimately, the data is in lots of other places, and you can see how complex it could get if you're trying to look at. So if you're looking at, some other monitoring tool, and it's going to show you the same thing. So you're going to look at this and say, well, now what do I do? Well, forget about having to guess what to do. We're going to show you exactly what to do, because we're going to show you, where the scaling needs to occur, why the scaling needs to happen. You drill in on all of them. You can actually see, again, the before and the after for certain changes. Some are so minimal that there's no impact at all. So you're when you're looking at stuff, especially on cloud and on your virtual machine layers, you'll see the percentile utilization. You'll see the historic average. You'll see where the peaks have occurred. All this is being taken into account. I mean, how else would you know that we would trust that we're literally going to run turbo on turbo? Because we run our entire lab, where we're instrumenting our entire lab, so that we know if I need to spin up a bunch of machines or a bunch of containers, that I'm going to get the resources I need when I need them. And that's why we're actually running our production environment wholly owned and managed by Turbo. The lab environment that you're looking at right here, this is the demo lab, which is the only reason why you're seeing orange and yellow and red, because it's a rather uncompelling demo if everything is green. So we go down to the pod layer. In this case, we look like we've got healthy pods, so there's no need to respawn pods. Pod health will change based on, you may need to either scale out a pod or reschedule a pod onto a healthy node, because this is the other thing. Kubernetes, fantastic container scheduler, big fan. But what happens if the underlying host becomes unhealthy? Well, the problem with Kubernetes is it needs it to completely tip over. It either needs to wholly fail or hit a pretty high threshold, and you've got to define the threshold. So do you want to be responsible for that, right? Most people say no, because at best it's a guess, and you'll be lucky more than you're right. And this is true about IT. This is not me versus you versus the system. This is literally us versus AI. Anything at reasonable scale, there's no reason why I want to be responsible for that. Because if I've got developers and I want to enable them, they should just be able to deploy. And then from there, it will scale as needed. So then we go in, we actually see the container specs as we've assigned them. So you can see all the different specs that are being assigned to the actual, there you go, turbo diff. Look at that. We even have our own, the way that it's managed. So you can drill into the spec itself, and you can see you're going to see different things that are applied about consumption that's being set there. Go back, same thing. Everywhere you go, you can see that supply chain. Just simply drill in, go back to where you need to, or go back to the search. You can see all the different capacity, usage. You're going to see so a lot of detail about where things are living, what the health level is, what utilization is, and then ultimately, so at the controller layer, then again, same thing. You're going to see that this is why turbo on turbo is such a neat thing. So we fully instrumented the entire application for you. All we had to do was run our own cube turbo, pointing at itself, giving itself a nice, beautiful little technology hug. And in doing so, what it's doing is it is able to show you what you would see when you deploy a containerized infrastructure, because you may not have one yet, or maybe you've got one and you want to understand what that dynamic supply chain will look like. So this means that you now can see, and this is when you deploy Turbo today, if you're running our latest next generation platform, which you're going to see a lot more of soon, what you're going to get now is this. So you get this out of the box, and it's because you need to be able to make sure that you know that we trust ourselves so much that we can instrument our own platform, and we do it out of the box for you. So there's no heavy lifting at all. It's really cool. So you've got the ability now to drill in, like I said, at every single layer of the stack, see what you're, in this case, because it's Kubernetes, of course, you're going to see it's listed as quotas because that's the actual allocations. You're going to see your containers. Same thing down the containers. You can go through. We can drill into specifics of total utilization. That's why we're looking at all of them, all the resources together. If you were to drill into specific containers, you're going to see those layers. So this is the magic of how we can do this. And there's more. I feel like an infomercial guy, but wait, there's more. But that actually had to wait because we got some really cool stuff coming up. I don't want to leak all my good news right now. But imagine if you had this over the course of a long period of time, like a true resource time machine, which is really cool. So hang tight. We got a lot of really amazing announcements that are coming up. So you have officially seen what the inception view of what I call turbo on turbo, and being able to see at the application tier, so all the way up at the top, all the layers in between, understanding as transaction flows, as service creation, application components, down to the container, down to the pod, down to the metal, all automatically instrumented for you. So that you know then as well, you target and you run Cube Turbo on your own, whether it's AKS, EKS, PKS, GKE, any upstream vanilla Kubernetes, you name it, you run Cube Turbo on there, and then it will point back to your Turbo installation. So that Turbo instance will then, again, do that same level of automatic discovery, and then ultimately using our mediation capabilities, be able to do scaling and sizing and whatnot. So we'll explore more as we get into the cloud native side of the world. But if you wanted to get a taste of it, you already have it, because you don't need to know what it looks like by building your own Kubernetes install. You've got it. You deploy Turbo, which is our next generation architecture. We called it Project Excel because it is something that allows for effectively, massive scalability. And you'll see the proof in the numbers as you see in coming episodes. We'll talk a lot more about that. But I hope that this is good. We didn't want to spend a huge amount of time. This is not about just us patting ourselves on the back, but I think this is pretty cool. And if you want to make sure that you are running the latest edition of our Turbo, we've got some neat features that we're going to have. I'll actually try and post a link in the show notes on the YouTube that'll have, I've got a 5-minute video on how to deploy this next generation architecture on vSphere. Is the example that I use, because a lot of folks that are running us today are running virtualization stacks. So I'll show you how to do it. It's a 5-minute video, and it shows you from end to end. The documentation, sometimes it always looks a bit onerous when it's a few pages long. It's because we are very exhaustive with the documentation. So I'm going to show you, like, this is it. Once you deploy and you start it up, you're going to see turbo on turbo that's baked in. You don't need to do anything else, which is pretty cool. So I hope that this has been good. Big shout out again to all of our folks in engineering who've been doing a ton of amazing work to make this stuff happen, and to you in our customer community and the entire tech community who've asked for these kind of features and have shared excitedly as we've continued to bring them to the market. Again, don't forget to join us every Tuesday. We're going to be featuring Turbo Tuesdays. All right, shout out to Jonathan. Thank you very much for the comment. That's fantastic. So we've got Turbo Tuesdays. We've got our schedule is up at turbonomic.com/labs. You can go to the office hours on demand, or just go to /labs/live, and you'll get there to the actual live stream page. Plus, we've got all of our upcoming episodes and then Turbo Thursdays. So join me this Thursday on August 13th. Is it 13th? Yes, August 13th. We're going to be deploying a really slick, cool static page using Markdown and Jekyll, which I'm a fan of. So I'm actually going to deploy a documentation site. If you're looking to document an internal platform and you don't want to stand up your own wiki or crazy stuff like that, you can actually make a collaborative documentation platform. So I'm going to do that. We're going to do it live with AWS Amplify. So join us then. Thanks again. My name is Eric Wright. Do follow us if you want to press that, smash that like button, do all those things that your YouTubers are supposed to tell you to do. But if you do, subscribe to us on YouTube. You can hit the little bell icon. You'll get notified when we've got new episodes coming up. If you're just watching us on LinkedIn Live, of course, you're following us already. If you're getting this link straight off Turbonomic, do connect with us on LinkedIn. And of course, you can find me. Just search for Disco Posse on LinkedIn. I can assure you there's only one. With that, thanks very much. Have a great day, folks.